All right, today I'm going to try to work on some of my problems with my power windows. This is a 67 coupe. Both front windows work with the driver's side switches. The windows do not work with the passenger side switches. The back windows do not work with any switches. So I took out a couple screws here in the door panel where the switches are. And we'll see what we can accomplish with it. So if you push it that direction, it goes down. Pull it back, it goes up. This one works completely opposite. You push it down and it goes down. Push it up and it goes up. I think that's the way it should be. So the driver's side seems to have the wires somehow backwards. I don't know how that is, but we can see if we can figure that out. And the rear doesn't seem to work at all. So I don't know if it's switches, motors. I've never worked on these before. It'll be a complete new experience for me. And maybe it can help somebody else learn something. So I took the switches out and I tested the switches. And the way you can test the switches is you can put your meter on continuity, and you see the brass colored terminal here. It's the one where the power comes in, and the others are the up and down for each switch. You can see there's two. So this would be up, this would be down, up and down. So the way you would test those, you can put your meter on continuity, or you can put it on there. Most meters have a setting that beeps when you touch the leads together. So if you have a setting where it beeps when you touch the leads together, that's the setting you could put it on. And you're going to put one of your leads on the copper. It's good if you have some kind of leads that you could clip on there. It makes it easier. So you put one of the leads on the brass terminal in the middle, and then touched it. Oh, it popped off. Then you can touch the other lead to the one of the up or down terminals, like I'm doing here. And then you have to press the switch. I don't have enough hands for what I'm doing here. If you press the switch while you're touching both terminals and it beeps, then that means there's a connection. And then you could move it on to another one, such as the down for the same switch. And when I push it in the down direction, it should beep also. And right now, of course, it's not, but it did earlier. It's hard to, having problems holding it. All right, so now I'm pushing it in the down position while I'm holding it on there. And you see it works. So I've tested all four of these switches and they all work good. One thing that does kind of concern me is I look at the terminals in here and they appear to be kind of corroded. And this thing is not meant to be taken apart, but I'm sure they don't make it anymore. So it may be something that I have to take apart and clean the corrosion on. And I'll make a video and show how I do that if I do it. But I can plug it on there and test it and see if it's getting power through the switches. But corrosion in these connectors on these old cars is a big problem. If it's corroded or the connector's not tight, it doesn't fit on there tight, then stuff won't work. All right, so I've tested all my switches and all the switches on the driver's door work. And as long as I've had the car and as long as my brother had the car, the front windows worked with the switches on the driver's door. The back windows never worked. But after messing around with this one a little bit. I've got the back window moving a little bit. It probably needs all the tracks greased and all that stuff. But the back driver's window is working a little bit, which means it's getting signal all the way to the motor. And I tested it with the meter on voltage. And the way you do that is you put one terminal to ground somewhere on the car, and you can put it on DC volts, and you would put it on the wire for the switch that you're trying to test. And when you push the switch, you'll see the volts, and right now it's 7 volts. The car's not running, so it's not getting any additional voltage. But with the switch down for that back window on the passenger back, there's power coming out of the back of this switch, but the window's not moving at all. So that tells me it's not either not getting a signal all the way back to that motor, or that motor has a problem. So my next step, I guess, will be looking back there, and so pretty much I can put this switch back in because there's no problems with it. I think all my windows could use some lubricating on the wheels and parts inside there, and when I do that, I'll record that also. But you got to take the door panels and the rear panels off, and I don't know how the rear panels are on this car, but on my Impala, they're pretty hard to take off, so it'll probably be a little bit of aggravation. But that's where I'm heading now. So I've got 3 windows that are moving now from the driver's door. That's a little bit of an improvement from where I was. All right, so I kind of had a surprise. It was easier to take off than what I thought. There's a screw at the bottom, and there's a screw in the front. And then I took the switch block out. But then it just pulls forward and pulls out. I don't know, still don't know if I have access. I'm guessing the motor's going to be under this cover here. So maybe it'll be something I can get to. Okay, so after I took the side panel cover off, I've took this little cover off. It's 5 screws. It has 5 screws that use a 5/16 nut driver. And then it appears like it's just gonna slide out. You can see where it's sitting on here. One thing I've still got is this top cover on, which is gonna require a few more things if I have to take it out. I think I'll have to take the window trim off. Kind of hoping I don't have to take that out. All right, so through that access cover, I can get to the window motor, and it's not really easy to get to or easy to see, but it's in there. And I guess the fun begins to try to test this motor, because this is the one that hasn't given any indication that it works at all. And stuff's pretty amazing the way they got it packed in here, and I guess you're supposed to work on it through this little hole in the blind. So now comes the time that we're gonna, I may pull the connector off the motor and see if they're getting power to the motor. All right, so I've pulled the motor off, the motor wire off on the inside, and I can actually pull it out this side. It's in this grommet. I just got to get the grommet out. Then I can get a better idea if I'm getting any voltage to this motor in the back. Okay, so I pulled the wire out of the grommet. Pulled the grommet out of the hole and pulled the connector out so I can look at it. And already I see something that looks really bad. Look at the amount of rust that's in that connector to the motor. I'm not sure what's going on there. It might have even broke the motor connector off. But it's rusted, so no doubt that's the reason. So now I gotta reach in there and see if I can find out if the terminal is broken off the motor. And it is. So I know I've got a bad motor back here. The motor has a bad terminal on it. I don't know if that's something I can repair or not. I'll have to pull it out and look at it. But the connector is, the motor terminal broke off in the connector as I was removing it. It looks like it had a lot of rust in it. So that's definitely one reason this back window is not moving at all. All right, so I took the pins out of the connector, and you can see clearly that you can see clearly that the connector on the motor broke off and it was extremely rusted. So apparently this got wet at some time. The other wire looks perfectly good. In the process, I broke my connector, so I got to find another connector. So we'll see what we got to do. And I'm gonna have to pull this motor out. I don't know what's involved in that, but we're gonna find out. So I was able to pull the piece of the connector from the motor out of the connector of the plug, and you can see what it is. I've seen them a million times, but yeah, this one rusted into it, and you can tell it's been broken for a long time because there's rust on all the sides of it, even the broken side. So that means I'm probably getting a new motor at a minimum. All right, so it appears to remove the power window motor, I'm gonna have to take out these bolt here and a bolt here. You can't get to it from the inside, they're facing the metal wall. So I'm gonna see how this works out. All right, so I got the window motor out, and it was a pain to get out, but you can see the connector's broken off on this one, rusted off. So I like to see how things work, so I'm probably gonna take this motor apart and see if it's still good or if it can be fixed. I'm kind of thinking it's not in such good shape because I see rust there also. But I'm just gonna tell you, taking these back windows out is a pain. And it is one of the worst jobs that I hate on any old car. Maybe it's just because I don't know about it, but as of right now, I can't even get the glass out. I don't know what the secret is to that. I'm thinking that piece of weather stripping maybe has to come out, but all the weather stripping's brittle on this car. I've still got some, I haven't bought any of that yet, but you can see the window down in there. It's really difficult. I had to take the tracks out, and I really don't like doing that. On my Impala, I had a really hard time getting that junk realigned. But there was no choice, considering the condition of my motor. So I'm gonna grease everything up and make sure everything's good while I got it apart also. Well, I took the motor apart as far as I could. It doesn't appear to be something that I can fix with the broken terminal. The coil is, I don't know if it's welded or kind of looks like it might be welded into the bottom of the motor. And the connector's on the back side of that, and it's not removable as far as I can tell. So it looks like I'm gonna be getting me a new motor of some kind, which doesn't surprise me. You can see how the inside of them are. It's probably seen its better days. The grease is all dried up and nasty. But that is definitely a problem with this window. The only window that didn't move at all. This is what I've encountered. The other windows, I think I'll be able to take them apart and grease them and clean them up and probably be okay. But I'm going to tell you, taking those back windows out is really difficult. And ideally, the best time to do that, you would have the weather stripping to go back with them. Because then, if not, you're going to end up having to take them apart again. So I took apart the window switch in the back that wasn't getting any continuity at all. And this is what's inside of them. You can see there's contacts, and you can also see that that contact is corroded so bad, so there's no way it's ever going to work. This one looks pretty good. So the way it's held in is the metal is kind of crushed in on the sides of it. So it can be pretty difficult to put back in and make it work too, probably. But there may be a way. I'm sure some people refurb them. But basically, that plastic goes in there and the switch goes in there. And the little rocker pieces push on those metal contacts. All right, so I took the contacts out and I sanded them and I put them back in, and you just take something and kind of tap on the edges to hold that board in place. And I checked it with my meter on continuity again, and it works perfect now. So that switch is fixed. Do not have to do anything else to it. So that's a good way to fix those switches and not have to spend money if they're in decent shape, which mine was. It just had the corrosion on the contacts. So now I just got to find me a motor and I could put it all back together and make this work. Assuming I have power to it. I never checked the power yet, but didn't really need to check the power after I saw the broken terminal on the motor. I know I need to get me a motor now. All right, so I put me a pair of gloves on, try to protect my hands a little bit. And then I'm going to put, like I said, I'm going to put another set of vice grips on here to try to hold this from moving. I got to put them in a place that it's not going to be in my way also. All right, so I got two sets of vice grips on here now. So now I'm going to remove this gear. All right, so I got the gear out. Now the new window motor is going to go right back in the same spot. And it went right on there. So with that being said, I'm going to put 3 bolts back in and hold it on. So we've got all 3 bolts in now, and I got them snug tight. I'm going to take the clamps back off. One at a time. Alright, so now the clamps back off, the gears are engaged, and everything went really well there. So the new motor came with a little pigtail that plugs in. I guess this motor works for a lot of different years. This motor came from eBay. It's the only place I could find one. I'm sure there's other places. It's what I found. So, and it was $69. And I'm gonna put the pigtail on there. It snapped on, and I bought this adapter because I broke the connector on mine. So what I'll probably do is just take the pins out of this and put my original ones in, and then I won't have as much wire and as much work to do. But I'm probably going to hook the motor up. I'm going to hook it up on a power supply and test it out. Alright, so I got it hooked up to a 12-volt DC power supply, which is the same as the car, just to test the motor out. And you can see it goes all the way like it should. And then if you put power on one prong, it goes one direction. Put power on the other prong, it goes the other direction. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some grease on this. It looks very dry. Probably is very dry. But I know that my motor works the way I want it to work, so that's a good thing. So I've got some white lithium grease, and that's what I'm going to put on there. Pretty much going to spread in all the moving parts. I'm sure everything on this car is dry. I'm gonna wipe off some of that grease that I got in the areas that I didn't want to get it, because I seem to have gotten it everywhere. But this motor turns really freely and strong, so I don't know how much of a difference it is than the old ones. This one was broken completely. So we'll see when I get ready to test out all the others. I hope I don't have to replace them all, but it's a possibility. Okay, so I'm still in the process of trying to troubleshoot my power windows, and I have no power at any of the door switches except for the driver's door. And I'm trying to find the place where we're losing the power. So under the carpet in these wire channels, they do splices. This is a factory splice. It had electrical tape on it. You see the pink wires with the black stripes. That's the one that goes to all the switches. But this connection here, it doesn't look bad. This actually was the same problem that I had with my rear cell panel lights. They were spliced together under the floor, under the carpet, and the splice kind of disintegrated on them. But this one doesn't appear to be disintegrated, but I'm gonna have to do some testing with the meter. And I'm still tracing down where this is going to, where this is. Right now I've got 4 wires in this splice, and I know one goes to each side switch, and possibly one goes to the passenger side switch, and one goes to the switch that's on the door. And that may be where my problem's coming in, but I don't have any power on the switch that's in the door where you can bypass the ignition switch. I don't have power on this pink and black wire, so I'm still tracking down the issue. All right, so through troubleshooting, I found a problem. I found actually 2 problems on my windows. This switch that's on the driver's door, that's emergency, normal, and lock for the windows. What was actually wrong was the wire that connects on the back of it. Somebody had put it completely upside down. This is a 3-prong plug, and these just slide down on there. All right, you see how the back of it's made? There are 3 straight in a line, and this just slides down on there. So somebody had put it completely backwards, which made this thing, the way it was working is the windows would roll up and down all the time, whether the keys were in there or not. And none of the rest of the window switches would work except for the driver's one. And the driver's one would operate them all the time. So the way it's supposed to work is you have to flip it over to emergency and hold it and move the windows up and down while you're holding it in emergency, and that puts a solid 12 volts to it that's not ignition controlled. So there's 3 wires that come to it. You got the wire that is the 12 volts continuous, and then you got the 12 volt ignition controlled, and then you have the wire that goes to the other switches, which is made for the supposed to come through the ignition control whenever the switch is on. So the wire that goes to the other switches goes through this relay. There's a relay that's right here behind the kick panel. Right now the relay is not in, but the relay is bad on mine. All right, so we got 3 wires that come into the back of this lock switch. You have the pink with the black stripe, which goes to all of your other window switches that are on the other 3 spots. And you have the orange with the black stripe, which this one's faded, so it doesn't look quite as bright as it should. But you got orange with the black stripe, which is a 12 volt hot all the time. Then you got red with a white stripe, which is an ignition controlled wire. So it only works when the ignition's on, which is the normal method that you would use for your windows rolling up and down. The orange with the black stripe is on here for the emergency method, where you can roll windows down even if the switch is off by holding this switch over in a momentary position to emergency. So you have a relay that's controlled by the ignition, has this pink wire for the coil, and it has a red. This is where your red with the white stripe comes from. So you get your orange with the black stripe coming into the relay as a hot. And then when the ignition switch turns on, power comes through the pink wire, goes into the relay, and it closes the contacts, which puts power through the red with the white stripe, which goes to this emergency and lock switch for the power windows. So on my car, the problem is two problems. They had the plug on here backwards, which made it to where it allowed power to come to the switch, to this switch at all times, and never to any of the other switches. And the other problem I had was the relay was bad. So I've ordered me a new relay on eBay. I found one on eBay, and I'm waiting for that to come in now. So then that should fix all the problems with the switches on my power windows. I replaced the motor on the back window here, and it now works. Right now I have no power because my relay is pulled out. But I replaced the motor and it works now, and it was a pretty hard job. I'm gonna have to work on the others after this because they roll up and down slow. So I've got to see if I can just lubricate them or if I'm gonna have to replace the motors. So I had to replace this relay for the power windows. This is the relay that goes to the power windows, and you saw it in an earlier video. Couldn't find one exactly like the one that came on this car. I found one that went to a Corvette, and it worked. The plug didn't work. I had to end up putting spade terminals on there and plugging onto it directly. But functionally, it worked the same. The plug was slightly different than original. I reconnected these wires together that was in the wire channel here. You can tell they're reconnected together with a heat shrink tubing on there also, and a lot better shape than they were. And still waiting on the motor to come in for this window, but it's going to be an install just like the other. All the power windows are working good now. I solved all the problems. As soon as I get this last motor in, everything's going to be like new on that. I wanted to talk a little bit more about these adjustments for the window tracks. You can see I marked this with a circle. That's where that's where the screw was originally sitting at. So basically when I put it back in, I'll have to center it up, tighten the nut up, and that's where the nut will be according to how it was. It's the same on the bottom. You can see I marked those too. But I try not to adjust these adjusters at all, because when you tighten this up, it pulls the window in and out, as you can see there. So I had to loosen up these top ones, but I took a picture and it shows how many threads are threaded into this, and that way when I go back with it, I can have it in a very similar location. It's probably the hardest part of doing the job of replacing the motors or taking these tracks out. That's also required whenever you change the weather stripping on the vent window. That track on the vent window goes all the way down through the door, and it has adjusters on it, and it tilts the window in and out. It's the reason I know that is it's the same as my 65 Impala, and I replaced all the weather stripping on it. So I'm just going to tell you, it's one of the most aggravating parts of working on the windows of these older GM cars, and I assume a lot of the other companies are similar. But getting these things back adjusted correctly is one of the hardest parts. So I hope you guys guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, feel free to comment. Please like and subscribe.